There is a town in the middle of Illinois with fewer people in it than seats in a movie theater. No skyscrapers, no monuments, no reason for you to ever go there. But I need you to hear me on this. This tiny, forgotten speck on the map once powered more of America than Ford, more than Chrysler, more than names you actually recognize. We're talking fire trucks roaring through Brooklyn, tanks crushing through North Africa, 80-ton locomotives hauling steel across the Great Plains, fishing boats off the coast of Australia, cotton gins in Mississippi, sawmills in Oregon, all of them running on engines built by a single company that almost nobody alive today has ever heard of. The company was called Buda, and this is the story of how it built an empire, then vanished. But here's the part that blew my mind. One of those original engines, it's still running, right now, in 2026, on a boat in the ocean. We'll get to that. But first, we need to start at the beginning, and the beginning is wild. Okay, so picture this. It's 1851. A man named Lajos Kossuth, a Hungarian revolutionary, arrives in the United States. He's basically the Volodymyr Zelensky of his era, a freedom fighter from a small European country begging America for support. He tours the country giving speeches in packed halls. Americans go absolutely wild for this guy. Towns start renaming themselves after Hungarian cities just to honor him. And one of those towns? A tiny railroad stop in Bureau County, Illinois, originally called French Grove. The railroad authorities renamed it Buda after the Hungarian city that's now half of Budapest. That's it! That's the entire reason this name exists. A Hungarian revolution, an American obsession, a renamed railroad stop. Now fast forward to 1881. A man named George Challenger shows up in this little village and starts a company. His plan is simple: build tools and equipment for the railroads, switches, signal devices, maintenance gear, nothing glamorous. Just the nuts and bolts, literally, that keep trains running. But what George Challenger is about to accidentally start will snowball into one of the most important engine manufacturers in American history. And he has absolutely no idea. The company is called the Buda Foundry and Manufacturing Company. And for the first couple decades, that's exactly what it is, a foundry. They hammer out railroad equipment, switch stands, hand cars. They build velocipedes, those little one-man pump carts you see in old movies where a guy is frantically pumping a lever to ride down the tracks ahead of a locomotive. But here's where things get interesting. Around the turn of the century, Buda starts strapping engines onto those hand cars. Tiny, single-cylinder, air-cooled engines at first. Then two-cylinder opposed pancake engines for their larger motor cars. And suddenly, they're not just a tool company anymore, they're an engine company. And by 1910, they've relocated to a massive facility in Harvey, Illinois, just south of Chicago, and they're manufacturing engines full-time. Not just for railroads now, for trucks, for tractors, for buses, for boats, for anything that needs to move, or spin, or pump. This is the moment the Buda Engine Company is truly born. And they're about to do something that no other engine company had dared to do. Now in the early 1900s, engine manufacturing is basically organized chaos. Most companies are bolting cylinders together one at a time. It's slow, it's expensive, and every engine comes out slightly different from the last one. Buda looked at that and said, what if we cast the entire engine block as one piece? This sounds obvious now. Every car you've ever driven has a cast-in block engine. But in the early 1900s, revolutionary. Buda was so proud of this that their advertisements literally proclaimed them the pioneer of the cast-in block method. They ran ads about it for years. And they had every right to, because it gave them an edge almost nobody could match. Their engines were water-cooled, inline 4, 6, or 8-cylinder configurations. They featured long strokes, enclosed valves, noiseless timing gears, and self-contained oiling systems. For the era, this was like NASA-level engineering. But they weren't done innovating, not even close. In the 1920s and 1930s, diesel engines are the new frontier. Gasoline is great, but diesel offers more torque, better fuel efficiency, and the kind of brute reliability that industrial customers are begging for. The problem? Diesel engines of this era are rough. They knock like a debt collector at your door. They're hard to start in cold weather, and they put brutal stress on engine components. Then Buda discovers the Lenova combustion chamber. Okay, I need you to pay attention here, because this is the part nobody talks about, and it's absolutely fascinating. The Lenova system was invented by Franz Lang, the same engineer who created the plunger and barrel fuel injection system. The design uses a figure-8 shaped combustion chamber with a double air storage system. When fuel gets injected, it doesn't slam into a wall of compressed air and detonate violently like in a normal diesel. Instead, the Lenova cell creates what engineers described as a soft ignition. The fuel enters, finds less air initially, burns slowly at first, and then the hot gases from the air cell amplify the combustion in a controlled, regulated way. The result? Almost no diesel knock, lower stress on bearings, an injection pressure of just 50 atmospheres instead of the brutal pressures other systems required. And this is the kicker, the outer air chamber could be manually shut off with a valve to allow cold starting without any electrical heating aids. Buda licensed this technology and married it to their existing engine platform. The Buda Lenova diesel was born. And it was a monster. Early 4-cylinder gasoline Buda engines produced 30 to 60 horsepower. The 6-cylinder Buda Lenova diesels, over 200 horsepower. In the 1930s and 40s, that was an enormous amount of power for a compact, reliable engine. Now here's the part that really shows how dominant Buda became. I started counting the companies that used Buda engines, and I had to stop because the list was absurd. Over 110 different truck manufacturers bought Buda engines. Massey Harris used them in tractors, Cockshut used them, Oliver used them, bus companies like Bridgeport, Luxor, and Pennant, all Buda powered. Fire truck builders Seagrave, Duplex, and American LaFrance, Buda engines. A California bus company called El Dorado literally ripped the 4-cylinder white engines out of their brand new buses and replaced them with 6-cylinder Budas because they were that much better. Buda engines powered electric generators, fire pumps, sawmills, cotton gins, feed mills. Gardner Denver used them in air compressors. They were everywhere, in everything, quietly running the infrastructure of an entire nation. And nobody outside the industry had any idea. Pearl Harbor. America enters World War II, and overnight, the entire US industrial base has to pivot from peacetime production to full-scale war manufacturing. Typewriter factories start making machine guns, car companies start building tanks. Chrysler gets a contract for 1,000 M3 medium tanks at a time when the entire US Army owns 66. But here's the thing that most WOGI documentaries don't tell you. The war didn't just need tanks and guns. It needed engines, thousands of them, tens of thousands. Engines for tanks, yes, but also for locomotives to haul supplies, for generators to power field hospitals, for landing craft, for construction equipment to build airstrips in the Pacific. And one company was already perfectly positioned to deliver all of them, Buda. Their Harvey, Illinois plant was already enormous, 500,000 square feet of manufacturing space with a workforce of 1,200. And unlike the big automakers who had to retool their assembly lines, Buda didn't need to retool anything. They were already building exactly what the military needed. Compact, reliable, industrial diesel engines in every size category you could imagine. The US War Department came to Buda with a shopping list, and Buda just started checking boxes. Diesel radial engines for tanks? Done. Small engines for freight shuttling? No problem. Massive engines for 80-ton locomotives? Absolutely. But here's what separates Buda from every other wartime manufacturer. And this detail honestly gave me chills when I found it. Buda engines were not made on an assembly line. Think about that. This is World War II. Henry Ford practically invented the assembly line. Every major manufacturer is using one. Mass production is the entire American industrial strategy. But Buda? Small crews of skilled machinists would take a single engine from raw castings all the way to a finished running power plant. Every part was hand-machined, every engine was built by the same team from start to finish. And then every single engine was load tested on a dynamometer for 8 straight hours before it left the plant. 8 hours per engine during a world war, when speed is literally the difference between life and death. That tells you everything you need to know about Buda's philosophy. They didn't cut corners. They didn't accept good enough. These engines were going into tanks that would be shot at, locomotives that would run 24 hours a day, generators that field surgeons depended on to keep the lights on while they operated on wounded soldiers. Every engine had to be perfect. And they were. The footage that survives from this era is incredible. You can see these engines firing up on the test stands, diesel radials with their distinctive sound, unlike anything else from the period. You can see the machining process, lathes, boring machines, hand fitting of precision components, all documented by the US War Department because what Buda was doing was considered strategically critical to the war effort. Two Buda Lenova Model DCS 1879 engines, massive 6-cylinder supercharged diesels with a 6.75-inch bore and 8.75-inch stroke, producing 325 horsepower at 1200 RPM, were installed in Whitcomb diesel-electric locomotives. These locomotives were shipped to North Africa and Europe, hauling military supplies across the most dangerous terrain on Earth. And Whitcomb earned the Army-Navy E Award for their contribution, an honor given to companies that showed exceptional performance in wartime production. Those Buda diesels were at the heart of that achievement. Now, were the engines perfect? Not always. Those locomotive installations had cooling issues, and some suffered cracking in the cylinder heads, which disabled locomotives waiting in the field for replacement parts. War pushes everything past its limits. But the fact that Buda engines were chosen for such critical applications where failure meant soldiers couldn't get supplies, couldn't get ammunition, couldn't get medical equipment, tells you exactly how much the military trusted this company. The Australian Navy used Buda Lenova diesels. The US Coast Guard used them. They were literally keeping Allied naval operations running in the Pacific and Atlantic theaters. And remember, at the beginning of this video, when I told you one of those original engines is still running? On a boat. Right now, here's that story. During World War II, the Australian Navy operated a harbor defense motor launch designated HDML 11321. It was powered by two Buda Lenova diesel engines. The war ended. The vessel was decommissioned. It passed through various civilian hands over the decades, and eventually it ended up working as a tourist dive boat based out of Darwin, in Australia's Northern Territory. When engineers inspected the vessel in 2016, 70+ years after those engines were installed, they found the hull in excellent condition, and the two original Buda diesels still functioning, both of them. One was slightly down on power due to wear on the original cylinder liners, the original liners that had been installed during World War II. Let me say that again, these engines ran through an actual world war, operated commercially for decades afterward, and were still turning over and producing power more than 7 decades later. With original parts, that's not just engineering, that's a time capsule. That's a monument to what happens when a company refuses to build anything less than the best. There's even a restoration project underway to bring HDML 1321 back to its wartime configuration, because people recognize that this vessel and its engines are a piece of living history that's too important to lose. But here's the tragedy. Because while those engines kept running, the company that built them, it didn't. After the war, America entered the 1950s. Diesel technology was exploding. Farm tractors, construction equipment, locomotives, everyone wanted diesel, and everyone wanted it now. Buda was sitting in arguably the best position of any engine manufacturer in the country. They had the Lenova technology, they had the reputation, they had the Harvey plant, they had the skilled workforce. But there was a problem, a big one. Allis-Chalmers, one of the largest agricultural and construction equipment manufacturers in America, had been buying engines from various outside suppliers, including Buda, but they'd also been buying from Detroit Diesel, which was a division of General Motors. And in the early 1950s, GM acquired Euclid, a heavy equipment company, which suddenly made General Motors a direct competitor to Allis-Chalmers in the construction equipment market. Allis-Chalmers looked at that situation and made a calculated decision. They needed their own engine supply. They couldn't keep buying from a competitor's subsidiary. They needed to own a diesel engine manufacturer outright. And in 1953, they bought Buda. Now, acquisitions don't always kill companies. Sometimes they supercharge them. Sometimes the bigger company injects capital, expands production, takes the product global. That's not what happened here. Buda was merged entirely into Allis-Chalmers as part of their new engine division. The Harvey plant kept running, but it was no longer the Buda Engine Company, it was just the Harvey plant. The Buda Lenova diesels were renamed Allis-Chalmers Diesel. The name Buda was quietly erased from every product, every advertisement, every piece of documentation. 72 years of history, over 100 truck manufacturers served, Engines in everything from fire trucks to warships. A company that helped win World War II. Gone, absorbed, forgotten. The engines themselves lived on for decades under the Alice Chalmers badge. The Harvey plant continued to develop new designs, including ambitious V8 and V12 diesel projects in the early 1970s. But only about 58 production V12 engines were ever built. Most ended up in generators. A few went to Canada. A pair powered a dredge. The era of Buda's industrial dominance was over. And then the final blow. Spare parts for pre-wee-wee Buda engines were available for years through a parts supplier in Shreveport, Louisiana, run by a man named Jim Cousins. When Jim passed away in the early 2000s, his family, facing pressure to vacate the warehouse, scrapped the remaining inventory. The last stockpile of original Buda flathead engine parts on Earth, gone, destroyed, making those early engines essentially impossible to fully restore today. So why am I telling you this story? Why does a company that disappeared 70 years ago matter? Because the story of Buda is the story of America itself. Think about it. A tiny town named after a Hungarian revolution, a founder who just wanted to build railroad tools, an accidental pivot into engines, an innovation, the cast-in-block method, that became the standard for every engine built since. A proprietary diesel technology so advanced it eliminated diesel knock decades before anyone else figured it out. A wartime production effort that put engines in tanks, locomotives, and warships on multiple continents, all hand-built by small crews of craftsmen who tested every single unit for 8 hours before shipping it. This company did everything right. Their products were superior. Their craftsmanship was legendary. Their engines literally outlasted the company by decades, by the better part of a century, if you count that dive boat in Darwin. And yet, nobody knows their name. There's something important in that, something worth sitting with. Because we tend to think that the best product wins, that quality rises to the top, that if you build something truly great, the world will remember you. But the world doesn't always work that way. Sometimes the best companies get swallowed by bigger ones. Sometimes the name on the engine gets changed, and within a generation, the original builders are forgotten. Sometimes the last warehouse of spare parts gets scrapped because the one guy who cared enough to maintain them passes away. The story of Buda Engine Company is a reminder that behind every machine you've ever used, every truck that delivered your packages, every generator that kept your hospital running during a blackout, every tractor that plowed the field that grew the food on your table, there are stories, names, people, companies that gave everything they had to build something that worked, something that lasted. Buda built things that lasted, and now at least you know their name. Oh, and one more thing. Remember the town of Buda, Illinois? The place where it all started back in 1881? Population today, 482. A little village in Bureau County where the median age is 36. The nearest college is 44 miles away, and most people drive right past it without a second thought. But that little town also produced Chick Hearn, the legendary voice of the Los Angeles Lakers for over 4 decades, and Harry Trickel, who pitched for the St. Louis Cardinals. Buda, Illinois, population 482. Birthplace of a sports broadcasting legend, a major league pitcher, and an engine company that secretly powered the entire country. Not bad for a cornfield named after a Hungarian revolution. If this story surprised you, if you had no idea this company existed, you're not alone. I didn't either until I fell down this rabbit hole, and I think there are hundreds of stories like this one. Companies, inventors, and innovations that shaped the world and then just disappeared from memory. If you want to see more stories like this, the forgotten empires, the invisible machines, the hidden history behind the everyday world, hit that subscribe button. I'm going deep on these, and the next one might be even wilder than this. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.